I saw, I came, I saw, I praise the Lord, then break the law. I take what's mine, then take some more. It rains, it pours, it rains, it pours. I came, I saw, I came, I saw.
Now, I may be a communist, but at least I'm not a fool. The funny thing about Trump is that if he had been in South America or Africa or anywhere in the global south, really, he would have bipartisan support from Democrats and Republicans, being that the CIA would have planted him there in order to undermine workers' rights and bulldoze through indigenous territories. But be it that he's in America, he had to be, resisted in the most humane way possible, and they weren't able to impeach him. But if he was in South America, the Democrats would have supported him, just like what they did in Venezuela, Bolivia, Peru, Chile.
Caribbean, Greenland, El Salvador too, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Venezuela, Honduras, Guyana, and still Guatemala, Bolivia, then Argentina, and Ecuador, Chile, Brazil, Costa Rica, Belize, Nicaragua, Bermuda, Bahamas, Tobago, San Juan, Paraguay, Uruguay, Suriname, and French Guiana, Barbados, and Guam.
Oh, so before the inauguration, let's talk about the siege of DC. What I think is so funny is that, like, whenever working class people have issues, can't put food on the table, behind on rent, can't pay for health care, going bankrupt because of it, the response from politicians is you should call your local representative to voice your frustrations. But during the siege of DC, they acted like the world was melting. I, for one, wasn't concerned at all about the well-being of our politicians, being that they couldn't give us any stimulus during a pandemic, and none of them live off $1,200 for 8 months. But the common folk, the serfs, should be expected to, put up and deal. But with them, when their lives are directly in risk, the world is ending, and this is so dangerous to our democracy, and we should be upset and crying and just enraged by everything going on. But, let the neoliberals infight, let the Democrats and the Republicans hash it out on their own. That's none of my concern. Representatives have more concern about their lobbyists and their private donors than they do the American people. So when there's a mob trying to, expose Russia, whatever that means, representatives can handle it. They put themselves in this position that they're above the rest of us, that they don't represent any Americans or anyone but themselves for that matter. So I wasn't at all concerned about the siege of DC. In fact, Malcolm X would have said it's the chickens coming home to roost.
Because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted?
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate.
But
only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing. Climate of hate means that this is the result of something. And when I said chickens coming home to roost, I said the same thing.
For all of them who are so self-interested in their own capital and private property that they neglected to do anything for homeless people, the uninsured, Black Americans, people facing deportation, any of them. So yeah, I could care less about the siege of DC. But the political theater between the neoliberals and themselves is really in vain, because while the president is not the most powerful man on earth, just like Congress members, they are a shell without their lobbyists. So, I mean, Democrats like to get up in arms about, oh, we have to resist and we have to turn the House blue and all of this bullshit. Well, if they turn the House blue, are they going to pass stimulus? No. They only represent their class interests. It's not about red or blue, it's about rich or poor. And once you realize that, you kind of see through the bullshit and you don't get wrapped up in the theatrics and the dramatics of politics. And for the hedge funds and the family offices and venture capitalists, I promise you none of them are staying up into the wee hours in the morning worrying themselves into a frenzy about who wins their election because they know they can buy whoever is put in the Oval Office. America isn't a democracy, it's oligarchy, and once you kind of accept that, you don't really worry about like the minutia that they freak out over. As in impeaching Trump after he's left the Oval Office. And while MAGA was raiding DC and representatives were fearing for their lives, what do you think their policy in the Middle East and the Global South has been for the past 50 years? They've been inciting violence wherever they see fit because they want to take a hold of lithium or uranium or oil fields, seeing what has happened to Syria, Libya, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, all the places that we brought democracy drones and undermined their democracies. They have blood on their hands, trust you me. So this should not come as a surprise to them that, chickens do come home to roost. And if you're going to incite violence in countries thousands of miles away from America, you can expect violence to come to you in your offices and in the halls of your most sacred institutions. Another thing about sacred institutions, they're built by, slaves. So if I'm expected to worship George Washington and Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln, who all had their own genocides and own slaves, I certainly shouldn't have to worship these like empty symbols of oppression. That's all America is, empty symbols of oppression. If you look at who's on the dollar bill, George Washington owned slaves. $5 bill, Abraham Lincoln, Wounded Knee massacre of indigenous people on their own land. $20 bills, Andrew Jackson, Trail of Tears. So there's too much damage done in America, and it's gone way past fixing their mistakes or addressing the past. They've had 400 years to address genocide and enslavement, but they haven't. There's still schools named after men who raped their slaves and individuals who, committed ethnic cleansing of indigenous people on their own land. So there is no come to Jesus moment. If there's going to be a come to Jesus moment, it's long past. But anyway, I digress. I was talking about the siege of DC and why I don't care. Oh yeah, because they lead wars for money and their own personal profit in the Middle East and South, Global South, and they do it under the guise of spreading democracy, all to kill hundreds and thousands of civilians so that they can get their little hands on oil fields and uranium mines and lithium mines. But yeah, so